This is Catherine Parker from The Haunting of Hill House. You're listening to Derek Thomas and the Monday Morning Critic podcast.
Welcome to the 11th episode of Breaking Down with special guest Doug Hutchison. Doug, it is so good to have you back on the show again.
Derek, it's good to be back.
And Doug, I'm going to briefly tell people, because, you and I have a lot of conversations off air, and some of them I could talk about, many of them I keep to myself. But on a previous podcast, I mentioned briefly how my dad passed. And
yes.
when I had told you that, you were one of the first people to call me, and just your kindness. If people are wondering what kind of person you are off camera, I can justify this without a shadow of a doubt that you are class personified, and it meant a lot to me that you called, because we have relatives that have not called, my mother or myself, just classless kind of stuff, but somebody who I've known for only 3 years calls me right away. Honestly, it meant the world to me, and I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. And yeah, no, look, like I told you, you're in my prayers and your family, and I really, I'm sorry for your loss. And as we talked, grief has many faces, and you need to allow yourself to grieve and miss your father. It's normal and it's beautiful. So anyway, thank you. But we all, that's we all, if we haven't yet, ultimately will contend with the loss of a loved one.
Yeah, and without spending too long on this, I find, Doug, that it has amplified. If I hated somebody before, I hate them much more now. If I've loved somebody, I feel like it's much more now. I feel like just what I'm going through, it's just amplified a lot of things, and I don't know if that's weird or not, but I find that the people that are kind to me and have been kind to my family, I think the world of even more now. And the people that were assholes and I disliked before, I hate with a vengeance even more. So I don't know if that's healthy, but that's just what it is.
No, you don't have to justify it or qualify it. It is what it is, like you said, and it usually takes things like this, brushing up against something so precious. Like loss, an illness, somebody gets cancer, something happens in your life, in all of our lives. We're all dealing with something. And usually when it exposes our fragility and how precious this life is and how brief it is, our adventure here, it does bring up a lot of this stuff. And none of it none of it's strange, none of it's weird, none of it's anything but normal. We're just human beings.
Yeah, and you would have liked my dad a lot. You would have found him very appealing.
I'm sure I would have.
Yeah.
I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to meet, but I don't know. Who knows what happens after we shed this mortal coil. Mortal coil, I think they call it. Maybe I'll meet your dad later on.
Yeah,
in some incarnation.
And I'll tell you, I sent you some crazy things, and I think I texted you this. I'm like, what I wouldn't give to have a real John Coffey in my life right now. To bring my father. It's just. And most people would have said, this fucking guy is crazy, and like you were so kind in your response. It was just, you're such a classy guy, my man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you are too, and I cherish our friendship. Thank you.
Yeah, and before we get to our topic that I introduced, I did want to talk about a few things. So one of the things is I do go to a few Comic-Cons a year. I'd like to go to more. I love interviewing. I love seeing what people dress up as. It's fun for me. Some of the things that happens at those, Comic-Cons is actors charging for photos and so forth. I don't truly mind that. Like, I think if you're an actor and you've earned your way, it's okay. But, and I'm leading to this somewhere with this, but like, I find that some actors, like, they say they're all about the fans, like, but I don't know, Doug, like, what's your take, right, on actors charging for photos? Like, I know you've done a con, and I'm okay with that, with autographs and photos, but like, where does it become like too much? Like, so a while ago, Sylvester Stallone did New York City, I think, Comic-Con. I could be off on this, but he did a con. And he was charging $500 a picture with fans. Right?
You're kidding me.
No. So, and he was treating them like shit. So, I'm scheduled to go to Chicago to cover the Star Wars celebration. I'm not sure if I'm going to go yet, but for a variety of reasons. I was just looking at what some people are charging. Like, I love Forrest Whitaker, but he's charging like $200 a picture. Like,
wow.
I'm not going to say that I've never paid for a photo at a Comic-Con. I mean, there's people that mean the world to me. And obviously, to me, it's like, so if you work with kids, right, and you're a tutor, like, because you work with kids, you're not going to do it. You love kids, you're not going to do it for free, right? You get paid for tutoring. Sometimes it's $100 to $500 an hour. So you're paid for what you do. To me, it makes sense. But like, how much is like way too much, and how much is like, and the autograph prices are just as bad. So, like, I don't know, like, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that, Doug?
I don't get it. I would never pay $500 to get my picture taken with Sylvester Stallone, with all due respect,
right,
or $200 with Forrest Whitaker, who I really love as well. There's no way.
Right.
So, look, I guess there are two sides to this. One is I would never charge someone for my photograph. That's ridiculous.
Right.
I don't even know. In this day and age, why is it even relevant? I mean, you just take your phone out and you take a selfie with somebody, whatever. It doesn't make any sense to me, really. But
and if you try to take out your cell phone, Doug, like, even just to take, like, so I always take pictures of the con to post on my website or Instagram just for to promote it, and if they see you, they'll try to take your camera. I mean, one time somebody went for my camera that worked. I said, "You touch my camera again, we're gonna have problems." Like, it's people are like,
that's really weird.
Yeah, it's like come on.
Look, I've done a few of these conventions because I was affiliated with the X-Files, and I did one last year outside of Chicago, Fan Fest. Now, I was paid. I will, admit that. They paid me a fee to be there, but it wasn't charging fans who came up to me to, get an autograph or whatever. I wasn't charging them a specific amount for my picture. That just came, I guess, with their admission fee, whatever that was. I don't know what they worked out with, being there. All I know is I got a paycheck, but it wasn't, you want to take a picture with me, give me $500. Right. I mean, that, to me, it makes me a little queasy.
No, I mean,
and at this particular Fan Fest, cell phones were definitely not banned. I mean, I took several selfies with fans who came up, and they would come up and say, "Can I take a picture with you?" Absolutely. And I'd come behind the desk and have somebody take our picture or take it themselves. And, I don't know. So yeah, I'm hot and cold on this, because on one hand, if you can demand that much money for your photograph and an autograph or whatever, and somebody's willing to pay it, well,
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah, that's
It's
true.
America.
Yep.
It's
That's true.
capitalism. It's a free market.
But Doug, you've earned your way to, like, so if they pay you to go there, I have no issue with that. Like, that's absolutely, you've earned that right because you've put a great body of work together. And I'm even okay with people paying for pictures. I think you've earned that as well. I don't know. I just wonder for like a family of 4, like, right? So The Walking Dead is notorious for this, right? They charge, I want to say, sometimes $80 plus for no-name actors, like actors you've never heard of. But it's like,
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a better way to approach it. I'm not against payment because I believe actors have earned it. I totally am for that. But I wonder if there's like a pass where you could buy a pass that includes admission and maybe a photo with your 3 favorite. Another way.
I think that's what happened at this particular X-Files fan fest that I went to. I'm not sure. I don't know. I have no idea what their setup was with admission and how much things cost, but I do know that, like, there was an array of different things going on at the fest. Like you can talk to the actors, you can get photos with them, you can get things signed. There was one part where the whole cast got together and you could come up and sit with the cast and get a picture taken with the cast.
That's great.
There was, they showed my episode Squeeze, and I went up and introduced it, and then I did a Q&A after that. And so there were a lot of different activities at this particular event. Now, I don't know what the price of admission was, but I do know that there was no money exchanged, within the festival. In other words, if somebody came up to an actor's booth and wanted their autograph or to take a photo with them, it wasn't like, okay, well, you have to, here's the bag, put $500 in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. And quite frankly, I don't really, I don't understand the passion for these Comic-Cons, these Star Wars, X-Files. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. But I guess, people love what they love. And,
right.
And that particular fest I did, by the way, it was, there were people who flew in from all over the world.
Right.
I mean, I met, Aussies. I met people from Sweden, Germany. I mean, they all flocked to Chicago, Illinois, to go. And David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson weren't even there.
Wow.
So it was just to meet, some of the recurring and guest starring characters on the series. So,
but I think it's a huge. But I think that's a huge compliment to you. I think that people have their favorite, like, so sports teams, right? They cheer and they love their sports teams. I think people have the same thing when it comes to acting in movies. They love their movie. They love their actor. That's the only way I can see it. And to me, it makes sense. I mean, I don't know. I think that if like I said, I think it's a huge compliment to you because you move people that much. Like that's a really good thing, in some ways.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, yeah. From that perspective, definitely. From the profitable perspective, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. Money is subjective, right? It depends. It depends on where you live, what your lifestyle is, how you spend your money. Some of these cats, I don't know about Sylvester Stallone, but maybe he has like 3 or 4 houses and he's got child support from ex-wives that he has to, and spousal support. Who knows, like, why they would, want to continue to fill up the coffer this never-ending coffer.
And if Sylvester Stallone needs $500 a picture to get through life, he should be firing his financial advisor, not his, But
on the other hand, you got to ask yourself, Derek, if somebody offered you $500 to take a picture with you, would you do it?
Absolutely. But you're right. You said it. You said it right, and I totally agree with you. I just, if somebody wants to pay it, it absolutely should be offered. But I do feel like in some ways, and you're completely right, that as much as these, I'll just take there's a certain Walking Dead convention that I don't trust the guy that. Well, I want to be careful with what I say, but they claim to be family friendly and this and that, and it's just total bullshit. They're not. Like they're it's all about the ultimate underlining factor in any of these cons is money, Doug. That's it. It's just all about money.
Oh, it all is.
Yeah.
Follow the money trail.
Yep.
I mean, and you know what? It's really interesting, money, because I've realized, it's even biblical. That there's a false idea that it says in the Bible that money is the root of all evil. Well, that's actually not the quote. If you look at it, it's the love of money is the root of all evil. And there's a big difference because, hey, I love making a living. You do too. Everybody does. But it's when you start, sacrificing your morals, sacrificing your whatever to gain money, then you start becoming a slave to it, and that's the love of money. But money itself is not the root of all evil.
No,
it's
I agree.
actually liberating. We're all trying to make a living, no matter what we do. Actor, construction worker, director, janitor, whatever. I mean, we're just out to make our livings.
And I think actors earn that right. I think I'm not against it. I think they should be able to charge for their photos, but I wonder, like I said, how much. You know what I'm saying? Like, but you're right. Like I never really thought about it. If somebody wants to pay it, why wouldn't you offer it? Like if somebody said, Derek, I'll pay you $1 million a year to do a podcast on my website. I'm not going to turn it down, right? I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah.
So it's like, when you mentioned Bible, Doug, I have to be honest with you. I was very tempted to make a hand motion. That's an inside joke, by the way. But
I got it.
but before we get to our awesome topic today, I did want to, speaking of money, right? In the past, you and I have talked about like shitty podcasts, right? There's one that really got me going, but I've learned kind of in life that things work themselves out, right? But that people now realize how shitty a podcast this other one I talk about on occasion is. And how awful it is. And this podcast host definitely pays for guests, right? He pays every single guest, and most of pays for every single one, and I have proof of it. And almost all of them are no names. Like if I said to you these names, you would not know one of them. I was really happy, and I talked to you about this off the air, Doug, that I thought I've had many directors on the show, very talented directors, which is coincidentally a topic of today's show, but I had one, and they replied with, "He'll be on he would do your show, but it's $200 for the first hour and $100 for every hour after that." And I do want to preface this by saying this is a director that I love. Like I love his work. I don't just like it; I love it. But it was like, no, like I don't pay for interviews. Like. I want to tell your story, right? Whether it's Doug Hutchison or it's director Roger Donaldson or it's whomever. I want to tell your story, and about 10 hours of research goes into those stories. So I'm busting my ass to tell a quality story that's filled with research, that's entertaining, and on top of that, I have to pay you. Like,
what was interesting when you shared that with me is, and this is a director I've worked with, and we'll get into that a little later when we start talking about directors, but this guy's a multi-millionaire. So why?
Well, I have to.
Why would he want $200 an hour?
I have to.
Maybe that's why he's a multi.
Right, but I have to preface this. They did say that the money was going to charity, but it's like, not that I don't. Well, not that I think they're wrong or I don't believe them, but it's like, I can't donate to the charity I want. Like, I don't know. You know, their rational on this topic was that he gets so many requests that he has to charge. Well, what? What do you mean he has to charge? If he's that busy, then just say no. I don't know.
You know what would have been interesting is if I didn't know that about the charity thing, but you could have asked them, oh, and what charity is that? Right. And then, you know, if they tell you, you can call the charity and say, does this, just out of curiosity, you know, does this person, are they charitable to you? I mean, because that's kind of a nebulous thing, charity. Like, hey, I'm a charity. Right. Like, you're a charity. What's the charity?
I just feel like, and it's not that I think they're being deceiving or they're lying about it. I just feel like, I don't know, for me to get you on the show, you're strong-arming me into donating to a charity. It's like, I donate a lot to, in my own personal life, to various, charities, and, but I have to say, I don't understand that. I don't know. Like I'll do your interview, but you have to pay. It's the same difference with the pictures, right? The photos, right? If he can get it, why not? And if it does go to a charity, it's a great cause, I suppose. But I don't know. I just think it's a bit unfair. In other words, when people come on the show because they want to tell their story and they're legitimately just wanting to love to do it, how much can somebody possibly be into doing my podcast if I have to pay him to do it? Like, how much could they sincerely want to?
And then are they watching the clock? Like, it's $200 an hour,
right?
So is it like, is somebody like sitting there with a timer and it's like, okay,
right? So
you had your 60, you had your 60 minutes. Now you want to keep going, or we got to cut it off right now?
I don't know.
It's I don't know.
I think you're better off either saying, yes, I'll do it because I love talking, or no, I can't do it. Like, I think it's an ugly business once it comes to demanding money, whether they go to a charity or not. And that's not definitely what I'm implying here. I just, and I'm a huge fan of this director. Like, I love this director. And to use that against me, into saying, he'll be on the show, but you got to donate, and the interview's going to go over an hour, so I'm looking at $300 for an interview. Like, let me determine who I donate, what charities I donate to, and if I don't know. But anyways,
I'm with you.
The topic of directors is the topic of today's show, and I'm going to let you talk about that and what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, so we're breaking down directors today, but not just directors generally, but directors whom I've worked with personally. We thought that might be fun because I can give you some inside stuff, from my perspective working with them. And then was thinking that you, on your end, Derek, you can comment on these particular directors from your point of view, your perspective regarding the movies that they've made, whether you like them, whether you don't, what you think about them. And then when we get to your director who demanded $200 an hour to do your podcast, that could be kind of fun too, to talk, wax prolific about that director. So anyway, I've got about, we don't have to go through all of these necessarily, but I do have, I just picked out I've worked with far more directors, but I've got about 16 or 17 directors on my list that we can, just talk about. We can talk briefly about them, or we can get more in depth, however, wherever it carries us.
Let it rip, Doug.
Okay. So my first director, I'm going to start off with, I'm going to open the door with a director, probably the worst director I've ever worked with. I thought that would be fun.
Okay.
His name is William H. Macy. You know him, of course, as an actor more than a director. He is in the show Shameless. I think it's, what's that, Showtime, HBO?
Yep.
I don't know. And I had the misfortune of working with Mr. Macy, with all due respect, way back in 1986, 87-ish. I was living in New York, and there was a play called Fun by Howard Corder. And they were doing an off Broadway production of Fun. And I was cast in one of the leads. It's a two-man show. I was one of the two. And basically about these two adolescents who just spend a night not having fun. And an actor / director, I guess, by the name of William H. Macy was set to direct. And William, we start rehearsals. By the way, I'm making $12 a week doing this production of Fun, rehearsing for this production of Fun. $12 a week. Okay, that's significant only because, well, you'll see. So we're rehearsing with William H. Macy, and he's coming from the Atlantic, I think it's called the Atlantic Theater Company, David Mamet's company. He had like a theater group in New York at that time, David Mamet. And Bill Macy was one of his proteges, one of his students. And so here he is trying his hand out at directing. Well, all of my direction from Bill Macy was literally this: Doug, louder, bigger, more. I need more from you. So that's not my style necessarily. And so I wasn't giving Bill exactly what he wanted. So it was really kind of a struggle. I never had fun rehearsing Fun with Bill Macy because all of his direction was about overacting. I just didn't get it. And so we kind of clashed a little bit about it. Not fought, but it just, we came from different styles. In the interim of rehearsals, about a week before Fun was to open, I happened to get cast in a movie, and we'll talk about this director next, but I happened to get cast in a movie called Fresh Horses. It was my very first, I'm 27 years old. It's my very, very first offer into a major motion picture. I mean, huge for me at the time. And a huge supporting role. Molly Ringwald, Andrew McCarthy, who were hot at that point in time, the Brat Pack, 16 Candles, St. Elmo's Fire, all of those movies were, the Hughes movies, this was huge. Viggo Mortensen, who was then not known, hit one of his first movies. Ben Stiller, his first movie.
Wow.
The director, David Anspaugh, who we'll talk about in a minute, directed one of my favorite movies, Hoosiers. Mm-hmm. And Fred Murphy, the DP, won several Academy Awards for work on movies that he did in the past. So anyway, this was huge, and I got cast in it. And they were offering me quite a bit more than $12 a week. So But we're a week into opening, and I invite Bill Macy, William H. Macy, out to lunch, and we sit across from each other, and I just explain it to him. And I said, I'm so sorry, but this has happened, and I'm struggling, but, I think it's obvious what I need to do. And I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to drop out of the show. William H. Macy looks at me dead in the eyes, and he says, Doug, you are at a crossroads in your life right now. Either you go down one path and you stay committed to the theater and what we've set out to do here in New York City, or you sell your soul out to Hollywood. I couldn't believe it. He said, so it's your choice, but I'd ask you to sleep on it. So I slept on it, and the next day I called up William H. Macy, and I said, Bill, I'm going to do Fresh Horses. I'm sorry. And he hung up on me. The irony of the story is that you fast forward about, I'm going to say mid-90s, somewhere in there. I'm now living in Hollywood. I'm driving in my 2001 Jeep Wrangler. I'm at the intersection of Fairfax Avenue and Hollywood Boulevard. And who pulls up next to me in a convertible Beamer? William H. Macy, in movie star glasses, sunglasses, and a big Cheshire cat grin on his face. And I couldn't believe it. And the light turned from red to green, and he zoomed off, and I thought, who's the sellout now, Mr. Macy?
And I got to tell you, as we were talking about William H. Macy, his wife was arrested earlier this month because she was one of 50 people charged in that nationwide scheme where those wealthy parents were bribing their kids to get into those elite colleges. They're bribing them in. His wife, he's married to Felicity Huffman.
Right.
So that's a fun fact. But also,
I don't understand. Quite frankly, I don't understand what's going on. But why Macy is skating away unscathed? I mean, he obviously knew about it as well. I don't really understand why he's not being prosecuted.
Yeah,
why it's just his wife.
He's a perfect example of he is a good actor, I have to say. But as a director, I mean, just by your word, and I mean, just because you're a decent actor doesn't mean you can direct. You know what I'm saying? Like to me, it would seem like, I don't know, and from what you just said, it sounds there's a real big stink of phoniness going on there. So, yeah. I
mean, it's just so. I mean, not only is, from my humble opinion, is he not a seasoned director, but also we're talking about character here. I mean, like, he's not just a bad director, but he's a bad advisor. Why would you, seriously, put yourself in his situation or mine? Like, what if we reverse the roles and he came to me and I was directing and he said, I have this opportunity to be in a major motion picture and act with all of these amazing people and yada, 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 I would say to you, you know what? I'm going to miss you, and damn it, this is going to be tough to pull off because we're only a week away from opening night, but I wish you well. I want you to fly, and, you know, God bless you. I hope the movie's a huge success for you. what in the world? There's no reason on God's good earth why you would talk somebody out of manifesting their dreams.
There isn't an actor on the planet that would have sided with him and did what he said. He is, I mean, that is garbage.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who is your? I'm curious to hear the next name. I'm guessing it might be David Anspaugh.
Yeah, David Anspaugh.
Yep.
He directed Fresh Horses.
Great. Yep.
Like I said, he directed one of my favorite movies, Hoosiers. That movie about the high school basketball team. And I got to say, David, from my memory, I mean, I'm getting a little older here, so my memory's, it's not always completely spot on and clear, but he was cool. He treated me really well. They were very smart on Fresh Horses, and I think David may have had a hand in this. This was my very, very first movie. I'd only done stage up to this point, and they knew that. Molly Ringwald had casting approval. She cast me. So they had me whether they liked it or not. And but what they did was, what was really smart is they flew me. We shot in Cincinnati, Ohio, and where else? Kentucky. And they flew me out a week or so before I actually started shooting my scenes, so that I could just hang out on the set, kind of jack into the vibe, sort of get the idea of what this filmmaking was all about. And it was really intelligent on their part to do that, because I was extremely green and I didn't know what I was doing. But they held my hand and helped me through that. And so my impressions of David are really good. He wasn't necessarily a brilliant director, but he was a friendly director. I think he was doing a little R&R on the side, a little partying at night, maybe getting cozy with some of the actresses that he cast at the hotel that we were all staying at. But, whatever. I'm not going to judge him for that. I had a good experience on Fresh Horses. Unfortunately, as you know, the movie stunk. It didn't do well. It just totally tanked. And the LA Times actually called it fresh horse shit when they did their article. So that's my second director.
He is his college roommate was a guy named Angelo Pizzo, who wrote Rudy, who wrote Hoosiers, and he's also been a guest on the Monday Morning Critic. So small world. So it's funny that you bring David's name up and his buddy Angelo Pizzo. I love Hoosiers and Rudy, and I feel like, I don't know, maybe I certainly don't want to disparage him, because you would know more about this than I would. I don't know, man. Like, I feel like sometimes directors are like anybody else in life, right? So it's clear on Hoosiers and Rudy he worked very hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think directors, like actors, have those movies where it's like, well, you know what? Maybe giving 100% isn't in the cards on this one. And it sounds like that was the situation with Fresh Horses with you. With David.
It's possible. I don't know. I mean, you never know. The thing is, what I've learned in my journey is that, I used to be extremely judgmental about movies before I actually got into the business. I'd go see a movie and go, man, that sucked. Or, those actors are horrible, or, I hated that movie. And you have to understand, like, when you go see a movie, you're sitting there for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you're watching this thing, this creation. And whether it's a stinker, a bomb, or whether it just really is amazing and moves you, nobody, and I mean nobody, sets out to make a bad movie, even if it is bad. Nobody sets out to put in a sucky performance, even though their performance sucks. And so once I got into the business and started understanding how much goes into this process, pre-production, production, post-production, casting, everything. I mean, a director doesn't sleep. Seriously.
Right.
For months, a director does not sleep. So, you know, the final outcome of their creation, whether you can judge it, you know, the way you want to, but understand that nobody sets out to make a bad movie. I'm not going to come to you, Derek, as an investor and say, hey, Derek, I have a great idea. I'm going to shoot this movie. I want you to invest a certain amount of money in it. And you know what? It's going to completely suck. And I'm going to hire the worst actors, and it's going to tank.
Yep.
You know, are you in? Are you in? Are we skin? You know, so I've become far more compassionate, I guess you might say, or a little more forgiving. Maybe that's a better word. When I see something and it's just it's not to my liking, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, that stunk.
Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah, okay, but I know what went into it. So who knows? David maybe skated through Fresh Horses, or maybe he really believed in it and it just didn't fly.
Well, it's
for
clear
whatever
from
reason.
it's clear from his past work, right? I mean, I know it takes a team to make a movie, but it's clear from his past work that he has the capability of being a very, very good director, right? And yeah. Who's third on your list?
Third on my list is an actor nobody will probably know. His name is Harry Longstreet. And Harry Longstreet directed my X-Files episode, the first one, called Squeeze. And the reason I bring Harry up is because it's kind of funny. I'm in Hollywood for, just a couple years. I had moved there a couple years. I get a call from my agent. They want you to come in and audition for this new series called The Files of X or something like that. It's a sci-fi kind of thing, and they want you to come in and they want you to audition for the role of a mutant serial killer who extracts the livers from his victims and eats them. I said, okay, is there a script? They said, well, no script, but you don't have any lines in it. There's just an interrogation scene where you say yes, no, in this interrogation scene. And so anyway, on the day, I didn't really want to go in. I was living way out in what's called Canyon Country, out in rural California. So I had to drive all the way in to Fox Studio and Century City. And I woke up that morning, I had a headache. It was raining. I almost called it off. I was like, what is this? And I took a couple aspirin and took a shower, and I ended up driving into the audition. Well, I get to the audition, and I'm taken into the room by the casting director. Well, there's the director, Harry Longstreet, and on the couch are Glenn Morgan and James Wong. Now, Glenn Morgan and James Wong, this is their first foray into television. They're the quote-unquote producer-writers under Chris Carter on this new series called The X-Files. And Squeeze is going to be their third, I think, episode in the first season. So I go in there. They're sitting on the couch. Harry Longstreet's this kind of Santa Claus-looking character, like kind of robust, got a beard, mustache, gray. And he says, look, he says, I know there aren't a lot of lines in this for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the interrogation scene. But I really want you to do it understated. You don't have to do much. Just answer the questions. I said, okay. So we do the interrogation scene. And I say, yes, no, yes, yes, no, no, yes, no, because I didn't do anything. That was my dialogue. So there it was. They taped that. And so then Harry comes up to me and he says, okay, well, since we don't have any more lines for you, I want to do a little improv here. I want to see if you can be monstrous. I want to see if you can be menacing. I want to see your capacity to really, give us the chills. And I'm sitting there in that chair in that audition room. My head is banging away from this headache. And I don't want to be there. And I'm trying to digest his direction. And I'm thinking, what does this cat want me to do? Does he want me to, growl? Does he want me to be like Jack Nicholson in The Shining? Does he want me to bounce off the wall? What does he want me to do? And as I'm contemplating his direction and thinking about what I'm going to attempt to do, Harry says, let me clarify, just in case you don't understand. And I don't know what compelled me, Derek, but I've never done this before, ever, in an audition. But I got up, I stood up, I got out of my seat, and I walked right up to Harry Longstreet. And I got an inch in front of his face. And I said, and I quote, I know exactly what you want me to do, you motherfucker. Harry Longstreet turned a shade of milk white. And for the first time in the audition, Glenn Morgan and James Wong, who, by the way, I ended up working with on several other projects after the X-Files, they looked up from their notes for the first time. They couldn't believe it. And Rick Milliken, the casting director, scrambled. He was like, okay, Doug, that's great. Okay, thank you, Doug. And he escorts me out of the room. Well, I drive back to my home in Canyon Country, and I'm in the rain, and I'm thinking, okay, Doug, you just blew it. Your career's over. What were you thinking? What's the matter with you? Are you crazy? And you can imagine my absolute astonishment when I got home and got a call from my agent that said, you booked the role. Now, I only booked the role because Glenn Morgan and James Wong said, that's our guy. Harry Longstreet did not want to cast me. He thought I was completely bonkers, and he was afraid of me. And so I was blessedly cast in the X-Files because obviously it became such an entity. But I got cast based on calling the director a motherfucker. Even though Harry didn't appreciate that or want me cast. And that's basically it about Harry Long. I don't even remember his direction or anything. He was just kind of like a ghost on the set. It was mostly Glenn and James were hands-on. So yeah, that's my Harry Longstreet X-Files story.
That's great. Yeah, and I'm looking at his credits. He doesn't have many. He has as a director, he has 8. But that episode was good. But like you said, other people were involved clearly. And I guess he did a couple of maybe the TV series Fame. It's pretty much
Yeah.
it. He looks like he did an after school special. So at least he didn't tell you to get louder, like William H. Macy did.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
He didn't tell me to get loud. In fact, I think the reason I don't really remember a lot of Harry's direction is because he just let me alone.
He's probably scared.
He didn't really want to have anything to do with
Yeah, he was scared. He was scared. Who's the next name? I'm curious to hear this.
Okay. The next name is another name probably you won't recognize, or I don't know if anybody out there will, but God bless him. His name is Anthony Shaw. And Anthony directed 68 episodes of that old series, Murder, She Wrote. 2 parts to this story. One is that never say never, because I remember a time back in the day when, this is before I started acting. I think I was maybe even going to Juilliard at the time, but my brother Eric and I were watching television, and an episode of Murder, She Wrote came on, and I looked at my brother and I said, Eric, if I ever do an episode of Murder, She Wrote, murder me. Because it's never, ever going to happen. I mean, the most campiest, silliest show on earth, right? So here we are, fast forward. Now we're again into the 90s, like early 90s, mid 90s. I had just done my first stint on a movie called A Time to Kill, and we'll talk about that director in a bit. But it's called a drop and pickup, meaning they picked me up, they flew me to Mississippi. We shot in a little town called Canton, Mississippi, and then they dropped me for a couple weeks, and then they were going to fly me back to Mississippi to finish my scenes. Between the drop and pickup, my agent calls me, and he says, you got an offer to be a guest star on Murder, She Wrote. And I laughed, and I said, you've got to be kidding me. And he said, no. And I said, so I need to go in and audition for this. And he said, actually, no. He said, Angela Lansbury, the star of the show, is one of the only producers, actors, creators of a show where she doesn't hold auditions. She just gives straight up offers based on watching your demo reel. So it's a straight offer. And I said, well, how much are they offering? And he said, well, that's the other thing. Angela Lansbury pays more money to her guest stars than anybody in the industry right now. Wow. She just believes in paying her actors. And you've got this window of time between A Time to Kill, so it's up to you. And so I thought about it, and based on the compensation, and it was kind of a fun, silly role, but this art dealer who's like kind of a con artist, and so I accepted. And God bless him, this cat by the name of Anthony Shaw, who I told you directed like 68 episodes of Murder, She Wrote. Now he's stuck with me. And I'm what you would call, I suppose, a filmic actor, even though now it's silly to say that because film and television are sort of merging.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
back then, you have to remember there was a huge definitive line between a film actor and a television actor.
Right.
And if you ever watched any episode of Murder, She Wrote, you would see that it was all camp. It was all over the top. It was overacting, everything was just nothing filmic about it at all. So here I am, being a film actor on Murder, She Wrote. And poor Anthony Shaw was giving me primarily the same notes that Bill Macy was giving me during Fun. Doug, he'd pull me aside. Doug, you don't understand. There's a certain style to this show, and you've just got to give us a little more. Like, just bring it up a bit. You're just kind of downplaying it a bit. And I'd say, okay, Anthony, no worries. And then we'd do another take, and I'd do the same thing. And he'd come up to me, Doug, I don't think you understand. We got to amp this up. Okay, I got it. And what I figured out is that on television, they only have so much time.
Right.
Like, they'll shoot an episode in 8 days. So they can't sit there and take 24 takes like you can do in a movie. They have 1 or 2 takes if they're lucky. So I figured out all I got to do is do what I want to do, stick to my guns, and they're going to have to move on. So every time he came up to me and gave me these ludicrous directions of amping it up, I would say, okay. And then I would bring in my subtle performance. And finally, Anthony, out of just sheer frustration, was like, okay, good. Cap it. Let's move on. Next scene. And I did that throughout the entirety of Murder, She Wrote. And if you ever watch my episode, it's called Deadly Bidding, I think. It's called Deadly Bidding. You'll laugh hysterically because he was right. The show has a certain campy style, and what I was bringing to it was the antithesis of that. And so I stand out like a sore thumb in that episode. I don't belong there. It's like it's like bananas and apples, apples and oranges. I just didn't fit. But I appreciated Angela casting me in it, and I learned at that point in time, much to my brother's delight, to stick it to me every time we talked about it. Never say never.
So, because
he's like, hey, dude, you did Murder, She Wrote. You remember what you told me if you ever did an episode of Murder, She Wrote? Well, here's the gun.
And the one thing you didn't, maybe you mentioned it and I missed it, but I don't think I did. But the one thing you didn't mention that I'm sure you know is that Anthony Shaw, his mother is Angela Lansbury.
No.
Yes. I just looked it up.
I didn't know that.
Yes, his father is Peter Shaw and his mother is Angela Lansbury.
That is wild. I had no idea. Well, no wonder.
And his filmography makes much more sense because after his 68 episodes of directing Murder, She Wrote, that's it. Like, he doesn't, as a director, that is all he's got.
Exactly. Oh, God bless him. I actually felt bad for him because he was just doing what he does, and I just wasn't playing along, and it just threw a wrench into the works. There was nothing ever contentious, or he wasn't taking me to task, or there was no bad vibes on the set.
Well, part of
the obvious,
Part of the pathway to old age and being elderly is you have to be a fan of Murder, She Wrote and Matlock. So I think, but no. So I'm dying to hear the next name, Doug.
All right. Well, the next name we segue into A Time to Kill because that's the
great movie.
The time.
Yep.
Where I did Murder, She Wrote on my downtime.
Yep.
All I'm going to say about Joel Schumacher, who directed A Time to Kill, is that, to be completely honest, I'm not a huge fan of Schumacher. I think, with possibly the exception of Falling Down, that movie with Michael Douglas that he directed.
Yep.
And I know Joel also directed a couple episodes of one of my favorite TV Netflix series, House of Cards.
Yeah.
I think he directed a couple episodes of that until, well, we won't mention his name, but somebody blew it. And House of Cards is no more.
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey. Damn it, Kevin. You blew it. What? Oh, I love that series.
Yeah.
Anyway, outside of that, I often find Schumacher's movies kind of, what's the word? Homogenized.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like he goes into the nitty gritty ever. It's even in A Time to Kill with such a horrific and like deep subject as A Time to Kill was. It's just really kind of glossy or something. I don't know. I'm not a fan. During A Time to Kill, he was great to me. I had no qualms, with him. He was sitting in the director's chair and taking charge. He knows what he's doing. I think he was more interested in Matthew McConaughey, watching Matthew McConaughey's ass in very tight fitting pants. In fact, I remember Joel saying to Matthew one day we were shooting, and he said, "Matthew, I'm going to make a star out of that ass." And he did. That was Matthew McConaughey's basically one of his first forays into motion picture, and Joel was good to his word. He made Matthew a star. And then I got to say, with Joel, he was kind enough to throw me a bone too. After Bill, he directed probably one of the worst Batman movies, Batman and Robin, with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. But there was a scene with Uma Thurman. She plays what is it, Ivy?
Yep.
Is it called Ivy?
Yep, Poison Ivy. Yeah.
Poison Ivy. Yeah. Yep. And she confronts this gang of this neon gang where she wants to take over their club or whatever, their space. And I'm the leader of the gang. It's like 45 seconds, basically, with Uma in Batman and Robin. You don't recognize me. I'm under this neon face paint. But we have a confrontation, and then she and her cohort kick our asses. And that's basically it. But Joel was kind enough to just call me and say, "Hey, look, I know it's not that big of a deal, but it's a scene with Uma, and, I love working with you in A Time to Kill. Would you be willing to come in for a day and shoot this scene?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So my experience with Joel was top notch. My take on most of his movies, not so much.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. He's a very, I don't know what my opinion is on him, because like you mentioned that the Batman and Robin movie, by the way, George Clooney is one of the worst Batman in history, but I remember Arnold in that movie, and I remember liking his part in that.
You did.
I did. I liked Mr. I thought it was really
Mr. Freeze.
He loved that. He loved his wife. Like, he was so. I thought he was pretty cool in that. I mean, I pretty cool. Get it, Mr. Freeze. But he. I don't know. I don't think that movie's. I get why people maybe don't like it, but it's like on IMDb right now. It has a 3.7. It's certainly better than that. Like, it's not everybody's cup of tea. I didn't think it was horrible. I'll tell you that. But I look at his filmography, and he's Falling Down's phenomenal. Lost Boys wasn't bad. I mean, he does work with Val Kilmer.
Lost Boys. I'll give it up to him for that.
He does seem to work with Val Kilmer a lot. Falling Down, as you mentioned, is great. 8mm is really underrated. He does some nice things. He took a shot with The Number 23 with Jim Carrey, which didn't do great.
Right.
But people like it. He's certainly not an incompetent director. I think you have to have. He has a style to him for sure. He's done some great things. I don't know. He would seem to me, Doug, as like a guy that would be like somewhere in the middle of your pack of directors. Is that fair? I mean, would you put him like?
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
But I mean, all of the movies that you just mentioned, including the ones that I did, Falling Down, and you mentioned 8mm, and whatchamacallit, what was the other one? It was back in the 80s.
Lost Boys.
Lost Boys, yeah. Again, they're topical movies that, from a different perspective, could be extremely gritty, extremely dark, like really. And there's something about Joel's style that no matter what topic it is, outside of the possibility of Falling Down, because I really did like that movie. It was tense. There's a gloss to it. Like 8mm could have been really freaking dark and scary to me.
It's almost like he can't get dark enough, right? He stops. He has a line where it's like he won't go past that line, but it's like to make that movie more effective, he needs to go past it, and that's a major issue, I would think.
I have to agree, yeah. And I mean, that's just his style. And whatever. I mean, he's working, and God bless him. I do know I respected one thing he did, and I respected a lot of things he did with The Time to Kill, but one of the things is, as horrific as that beginning sequence is, where my character and my partner and I, these two despicable redneck drunks, rape a young 8-year-old black girl and leave her for dead. Schumacher, he refused to shoot that scene with the girl.
Right. Well, yeah.
And so, basically we raped a camera. Right. They dug a ditch and they put a camera down there as if it was her perspective.
Right.
And we had to pretend it was her and punch her, but we're like punching the camera, looking like we're punching her and stuff. So he was very sensitive about things like that. And so I think there is a sensitivity about Schumacher, and perhaps that's it. Perhaps that's what kind of bleeds into his shooting an R-rated movie that actually looks like it's PG-13.
Yeah, it's well said. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I love Time to Kill is one of my all-time favorite movies. I like it a lot. The idea that Samuel Jackson would go free after killing, I don't know how many people was on his kill count, and it would never happen. But it's like I thought Matthew McConaughey's performance at the end, your performance too. I thought it was a great. Time to Kill is a fantastic movie. Very underrated. Speaks volumes about a lot of what's happening nowadays. I think you're right. I think Joel Schumacher, Doug, is a guy that lets his convictions kind of get in the way of his. I don't want to say get in the way, but plays a big part in his direction. Where a guy like David Fincher, who directed Seven, probably would have been a better choice for some of those movies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or, I'm even thinking could you imagine if Martin Scorsese directed Falling Down, or it's just, it's like Joel pulls punches a little bit, where these other directors don't.
Right. So who is next on your directing list?
Next on my list is a director by the name of Simon West, and I worked with Simon on a film called Con Air. John Malkovich and a bunch of other stars, Nicolas Cage, and it's an interesting story. It's kind of long, so I'm just going to try to put it in a nutshell because I don't want to take up all of our time here talking about Con Air. But basically, I was cast as one of the cons on. It's a movie. If you haven't. Yeah, if you're not familiar with it, it's these cons take over an airplane. They escape from prison. They take over an airplane, and they're going to try to escape to some island somewhere. But anyway, I was initially cast as one of the cons, Donald. And the reason I took it is because it had a really nice meaty scene with John Malkovich. And I was desperate for work at the time. I was agentless. And the casting director called me out of the blue and said, I've got this role for you. Would you like to do it? And I said, absolutely. A scene with John Malkovich. And so, I called an agency and I said, I just got this offer. Would you like to negotiate the contract and sign me? And they did. So I got another agent and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Con Air commences. It's a mess. There's so many people in this movie. I mean, like it felt like we were in prison. I mean, that they built this plane and we were all just stuffed in there, hot, claustrophobic. It was insane. And the thing is that they, even though we were all playing, a lot of us were playing minor roles, we had to be there every day for 12-hour days because Simon West on any given day never knew exactly what piece he was going to be shooting. So we had to be there in the event that we were going to be, even if our elbow was in the shot, we needed to be there. It was excruciating. And it was like 7-8 weeks, some atrocious amount of time. Well, about 2 weeks into the project, Simon pulls me aside and he says, Doug, I'm really sorry, but Disney's on my back and this movie's running way too long. So we had to cut your scene with Malkovich. So basically what he was saying is, you are now a glorified extra in this movie. I had no lines. I had no scene with John Malkovich. I had just come off, shortly before The Green Mile and Bait and a couple other movies. And I'm thinking, I cannot, because see, in Hollywood, everything's perception, right? I cannot be perceived as an extra. What are people going to think?
Right.
Like, what happened to Doug Hutchison? Like, he's an extra in Con Air. So I ended up successfully, I might add, editing myself out of the movie. And the way I did that was every single time, as soon as they cut my scene with Malkovich, every single day, when I was on set and the camera came by me, I would turn my head around, or I would go down and pretend to tie my shoe, or do anything I needed to do to keep my face out of that camera. And there was one scene in particular where 8 of us are lined up and we're going to be landing in Salt Lake City and something was going to transpire. I can't remember, but I was one of the 8 and I was in front. I was the first guy. And so the camera was right there to my left, to my face. And so it was me and 7 other convicts in a row. And while they were setting up, I went up to the last guy who was an extra, and I said, would you like to switch places with me? Because that way you'll be featured more in this scene. And he said, yeah, sure. So we traded places so I could get at the end of the line. And when Simon yelled, roll, I would step back so that I was out of the shot. I would literally take a half step back because I was seriously physically editing myself out of this movie. And after a few takes, Simon came up to me and he said, Doug, what's going on here? Every scene we're doing, you're disappearing. You're you're out of shot. You're taking your. And I was just honest with him. And I said, Simon, since my scene with Malkovich got cut, I'm nothing but a glorified extra on this movie. And quite frankly, I can't afford that at this point in time in my career. And you know what? He got it. And he said, I understand. And he said, I'm going to accommodate you. He said, but do me a favor. Just make it just a tad less obvious. And I promise you that you will not come off as an extra in this movie once we get in the editing room. And I trusted him. And so, if you watch Con Air, I dare you to find me. There is one scene, one camera where it's pushing through all of the cons on the plane. This is before I got the news that my scene was cut with Malkovich. You will see me amongst the other cons, just briefly, as the camera slides by. If you freeze frame, you'll see me. But that's the only time in the movie that you will ever see me. With Simon West's help, thank God bless him, I successfully edited myself out of Con Air. So even though it's on my credits on IMDb, it's a movie that I'm not in.
And with that, Doug, we are almost at the end of part 1. I am very curious to know who the final director you are going to bring up to end the first part of our 2-part series, directors you have worked for.
The next director is Frank Darabont.
Oh.
The Green Mile, of course. Probably, as I've mentioned 1,000 times, one of probably the most blessed adventures I've ever had in my journey in Hollywood and acting. Frank Darabont, just stand-up director. I can't say enough about him. He had a vision and he pulled it off. And he was nothing but just every day was like he was gobbling it up on the set. He was like the Cheshire Cat, just sitting on his director's chair, smoking his stogie, smiling. And he had pictures in his head, and he directed us in those pictures. And I'll never forget. I'm kind of like I like to improvise. I like things to be loose on the set. And I'll never forget my first day. We shot the Dead Man Walking scene and brought John Coffey onto the Green Mile, and we were rehearsing it. And at one point, after we got John in his cell, I kind of leaned up against the bars of another cell, and Frank said, "Cut." And he looked at me and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Why are you leaning up against the bars over there?" And I said, well, I don't know. I just kind of felt like it, Frank. It felt like natural. And he said, no. He said, here's your mark. You hit your mark. I need you in the frame. I need you here. And he said, come here. And he showed me what he was shooting. And sure enough, he had a picture, a portrait, and I was in it. But if I stepped out and leaned up against the bars, I was like fucking up the portrait. So I learned very quickly from Frank that this was not a movie where I was going to be able to just do whatever I wanted to do and improvise. And, he definitely had a vision, and God bless him, it paid off. And one of the things that I really respect about Frank is that not only did he create a really happy environment on that set, like a positive environment on that set, as did Tom Hanks, as did everybody. It was just a great mix. But Warner Brothers was really afraid of the length of the movie. And they wanted to cut the beginning and the end, the bookends, when Tom Hanks' character is old in the senior citizen home.
Right.
And then at the end, when he's there at the senior citizen home and there's Mr. Jingles still alive, they wanted to cut those bookends.
Wow.
Because they were afraid the movie was too long. And Frank said, no. He stuck to his guns. He said, there's no way you're cutting this. He said, when I took this over, I told Stephen King that I was going to do justice to his story and his book, and this is part of it. This is a huge part of it, and you're not cutting it. And so I don't know what kind of contract he had with Warner Brothers, but he got his way. And though the movie is long, I think it's like 2 hours and 45 minutes or something like that, it doesn't feel that way. It's timeless. And Frank did it. Magic. And so I can't speak more highly of Frank Darabont. I loved him before The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, etc. I loved him during The Green Mile, and I have a fondness for him always. I'd work with him in an instant.
Yeah.
If he ever, decided to get on the horn and say, hey, I'm working on this. I got a role for you. Let's go. I'm there.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be like a genius, and you know what I think of him. I mean, you won't find two films better than Shawshank or Green Mile. You just won't. And it's almost like they transcend cinema. Those two movies. They're not movies. It's almost like they're almost spiritual in both of those movies in many ways. Frank is too good to not be directing, because as you're speaking, I'm reading and I'm listening, and I feel like he's. I'm not going to speak for anybody, but I would like to see him back directing again. I just would like him.
Me too.
There's too many shitty directors out there yelling louder for guys like Frank Darabont not to be directing. My God, like if I'm a movie studio, I open my door, I open my checkbook and say, Frank, whatever you want. Because look at all the garbage being pumped out, the millions and millions of dollars wasted on terrible, terrible movies, when maybe a top 2, top 3 director like Darabont, and I know Frank's got some things with The Walking Dead right now, and part of me tells me that's kind of occupied his time, and I just wish that would be resolved so Frank could just get back to. And I know he's a guy that just loves cinema. He loves movie making. He does.
He does.
He just loves.
Yeah.
He loves the art, and it's every director you said, you add them all up, compare them to Darabont, and they can't even touch him. Like, they couldn't even come close.
I couldn't agree more. And I don't want to speak for Frank, but like we talked about before, one of his heroes was Frank Capra, and Frank Darabont wanted to make his It's a Wonderful Life, right? That was his dream. And so right after The Green Mile, he made a movie called The Majestic with Jim Carrey. And unfortunately, that movie didn't go over well with the critics nor the audiences, generally speaking.
I loved it.
And
I loved it.
yeah, I know you're a fan of that movie.
Yeah.
I saw it. I liked aspects of it. I thought Jim Carrey, unfortunately, to be completely honest, was miscast.
Right.
But outside of that, it was Frank's baby. I mean, The Green Mile was amazing, but this was supposed to be Frank's baby. And after the accolades he achieved from The Green Mile, and then moving into The Majestic, and then when he got shot down, based on The Majestic, I think he took it really hard, and it's easy to understand, because it was his baby. And again, I don't want to speak for him. He's never told me this. I don't know for sure, but I think it took some of the wind out of his sails for a little bit. And I can't wait for him, if it happens, to get back in the game, back on the saddle, man.
Because The Mist was a great movie too. I mean, that was an awesome ending. I mean, it's I don't know if you've ever seen The Mist, Doug, but it's phenomenal. Yeah,
I saw The Mist. It wasn't one of my favorites, but Frank and Stephen King are really good friends.
Yeah.
So, Frank, he does Stephen King well.
Well, and one thing I love about Frank, and I think he would admit this if I could ever ask him. I think he puts out movies that he loves, and if you don't like it, well, go F yourself. But he does it. He doesn't regret. He doesn't do regrets. He doesn't do apologies. He kind of does his thing. It seems like he was very proud of The Majestic. He's very proud of The Mist, and he should be, right? Because if you're not making movies from a place of passion and desire, then you're wasting your time. And we mentioned a director that may or may not have, cashed in on Fresh Horses, right? Cashed out, maybe had his mind elsewhere. Frank Darabont would never be in that position ever. Like he's 100% focused on the task at hand, whether it's The Mist or The Majestic or Green Mile or Shawshank. He just seems like a guy that's tuned into what he wants to do, and he does it because he loves it, and he has no regrets. And that's one of the many, many things, Doug, that I really truly love about Frank Darabont.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yep.
Yeah. He's very invested in what he gets and what takes him, and he's a visionary too.
Yeah.
That's why, like I said, he paints pictures. There were portraits that he had in his head. That's why I couldn't deviate from those portraits. I had to be a part of it, and I learned how to do that very quickly with Frank. And it never felt restrictive ever. I still felt a lot of freedom within the perimeters of his portraits. I still felt free to bring my stuff to the table.
Yeah, where I felt like I really knew Frank? I feel like when I watched the making of both The Green Mile and Shawshank, and I would just watch Frank, he had such like a joy, like he was so happy to be making these movies. And it's like I feel like those assholes at AMC and The Walking Dead beat that out of him. And I'm so furious with that. This guy's not like an old guy. I want to say he's not even 60 yet. I could be off, but I don't think he is. I think he's
I think he's probably 60 at that.
Right.
If he is, yeah.
He's a young guy. He has so much ahead of him. And if this is one of those guys that feels defeated and he wants to cash out because of, like you said, I could totally see him being defeated, right? Fighting for minutes in a movie, fighting for this, fighting for that. And it's like these idiots at these movie studios are picking fights with the wrong guy. I don't know, man. You wouldn't pick a fight with Shakespeare. You wouldn't pick a fight with, a baseball team if you were Babe Ruth. So leave it alone. Let it go. Let him do his thing. It doesn't seem like like rocket science here, Doug. It seems very simple to me.
Yeah, you're right, and yet we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We really don't.
That's
we don't
true.
know what.
That's true.
We don't know what the contracts are. We don't know. There's a lot of fallout in Hollywood. I've been part of it myself, and it's like going through a divorce. Sometimes you love each other, and you're going through this romantic, the romance phase, and then you decide to get a divorce down the line. Well, there's a thin line between love and hate, right? So it's like, a lot of times, unfortunately, in this divorce where it started out in so lovingly, you have two different perspectives all of a sudden, of what's fair, of who has the right to what. And then you start fighting, and then you start hiring the greed bag lawyers, and then it gets into a mess. And so I don't know what the story is with Walking Dead. I really don't.
Right.
I have no idea what transpired. All I know is that, unfortunately, it seems that they didn't part ways amicably. And that's why it got into litigation, etc.
Yep.
So, and I don't even know how it was settled.
No,
I don't know.
It hasn't been. They're still going to court over it, and it's over a lot of money.
They're still going.
Yeah.
Court over. Jeez Louise.
Yeah. But I tell you what, we couldn't have ended part one with a better human being or a better director than Frank Darabont. I agree. Maybe the most talented director on the planet. And I don't know. And I tell you what, Doug, if you were charging by the hour, I would have to pay you almost $300 right now.
I'll wait for the check in the mail, my friend.
Doug, that's the end of part one. I'm so psyched about part two. It'll be out, I want to say, in a week or two. And thanks, my man. Thanks for everything, and both with my dad and coming on the show, and your dedication to the show. This is almost 2 or 3 years now that we've known each other. So thanks a lot, man. I love listening to these stories. I can listen to them forever, and I appreciate that part of it, and I appreciate the friendship part of it, and I can't thank you enough.
Oh, well, right back at you, as always. I love doing this with you, and I do consider you a good friend, and I'm really blessed by our, collaboration and relationship. So thanks for the opportunity, and it was fun. Yep. I love sharing these stories with you.